Hey everyone, welcome to MOTIV8 Unplugged. You made it to another episode. We're still around. They have not canceled us, and we're still kicking.
Wow.
Thank God.
Whew, I was worried there at that last episode, you know?
It was good. What do you mean?
The ladies did a great job. They did a great
absolutely.
job.
Absolutely.
So we're back again here with another listener suggestion, question that has been asked. And the question is leading or serving while young. And I don't know if this just applies to ministry or if this applies to just life and whole, leading in the corporate world as well as just church and ministry. But I feel like both of them kind of mesh.
Yeah, I mean, they kind of mesh, they kind of coincide together, but I just, I want to first start by saying, I'm glad to have my sister back. Welcome back, Patience.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
together.
I've been healed.
Thank God, and I wasn't introduced, but it's fine. No, but the, yeah,
We know you by now.
yeah, you know.
Oh, my.
Google me. But my thing is, I mean, serving while young, it's possible, but I just think that, what do we consider young? Like, that's the question. Like, what is...
That was my first question.
Yeah, like, what's young?
If Gabe was here, we miss you, Gabe.
Yeah,
Gabe would say, okay, boomer. Anything that's not a boomer.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, he used that one good the last few episodes. But what is considered a millennial? I guess you would say anything under 40?
Yeah, pretty much.
I don't know. Let's look it up.
I think one of the things, I guess, what classify it is, are you relatable to the next generation or the generation that is in place now? But I don't know about that because there's some people who are relatable who are in older generation as well.
Okay, so a millennial is anyone born between the age of 1981 and 1996. So they had to be between 23 and 38 last year.
Oh,
Yeah, it's pretty wide range.
it's pretty wide range.
Yeah, 23,
Yeah, that's a
30,
that's a
15,
very
15 years. Yeah.
Wow.
wide range.
You literally are hitting 2 decades right there.
Yeah, because I'm just
80s
like,
babies and 90s
what do
babies.
we relate to with a 15-year gap? Like, how do we relate?
Dial up internet.
But we talked about this. I talked about this.
I was born in the 80s, and I resent that statement.
You remember getting the AOL disc for 60 free minutes of internet?
I remember,
But it was like you can't use it because you don't have internet.
I remember Hotmail. Like,
Wow.
what was
You've
it?
got
What was-
mail.
Oh my
Ooh.
gosh.
Oh, AOL Messenger.
What was his name? Was it Bonzi, the talking monkey? Y'all remember that? It was a purple talking monkey.
No, I don't remember.
You could type anything in, and he would say, "Let me tell you something. That was my best friend, Bonzi. If you're out there,
Oh, my gosh.
I miss you. You're my boy, Bonzi."
Well, I'm going to take you on the throwback. Y'all remember the paperclip that would pop up on Windows?
Oh my gosh, when you were first
you tapped
learning.
the screen?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, man,
he
I'm
used to
like,
make me mad.
I'm
I
like,
shut him off.
But before we move off of this subject, you knew you were killing as a millennial back in school if you did your project or presentation with word art.
You were that kid.
I was
What-
that kid. My whole project was in word art. Everyone's going to get a load of this gradient.
oh my god! Oh, and don't let me get a slideshow going with the wipe. Oh man!
Oh,
yeah.
man.
My dad be like, "Yeah, I can do it for you."
little pixelated dissolve into
Oh,
the next
yeah.
slide. Bruh.
Oh, snap.
And don't hit the button with the little car.
Oh, yeah.
Yes,
Oh,
yes.
snap. You
I
took
mean-
it way back. Windows Movie Maker.
Oh Jesus, have
Okay, ping pong.
What
Was it the ping ball game?
No, the pinball.
Yeah,
Pinball.
pinball
Oh,
game.
man, the
The
Galaxy.
Galaxy Quest or
Let me
whatever
tell
that
you
thing
something.
was.
I
Does
did
anybody
lost
still
hours.
play Minesweeper?
No one knew what they were
I didn't
doing.
know how to.
tapping.
I'm like,
I guess this is it.
let me tell you something. At that young age is when you learn how to play solitaire.
Oh,
Yep.
man.
Yeah.
I cheated. I had the little trace on it.
That's crazy because I still don't know how to play. Sorry, guys.
I don't know how to
funny.
play spades.
I
So
don't
it's
know how
okay.
to play
I
spades
don't know how to play
either.
spades either. I don't.
Oh, we're in good company, guys.
We're not invited to any cookouts.
No, I ain't here for games. I'm here for food. What do you mean? Yeah, bring out the cards. Bye. Yeah, I guess, being young, but I think it's hard because it's going to be very difficult for us to answer that question because it wasn't the same when we were younger.
Okay, yeah.
So it's going to be kind of hard for us to kind of answer that because, it was a very good question, but we can only answer based upon from when we were young.
And we're still young.
Absolutely.
So it's like, I wonder if the question is more of, can you lead while young? Are you qualified to be able to lead while young? When you have a lot of people saying that you're not. I know that was an issue that arose, at least for me, dealing with leading, and it is a problem. It can definitely jack up your confidence
Yeah.
of feeling as if you're adequate enough to be able to lead in a space that most people spent years and years and years of figuring out. I think we talked about this a few episodes ago, where we could just have the opportunity to go online and figure out the answer in about 5 seconds.
Right.
Yeah. Well, you had mentioned something in the last episode, talking about mentors and finding mentors outside of what you aspire or what you're currently in order to gain knowledge, because I think that plays a role in leading and leadership, because you can talk about leadership in different avenues. There's leaders in middle school,
Right.
leaders in high school.
Yeah.
And so I guess when you're talking about leading while young, most of the leaders who are in middle school and high school, they just have an innate gift that God already put in them to be a leader.
Wow, that's good.
But if you're talking about leading while young and it's something that's not already naturally in you and you need some extra help, or you're looking for that extra help for somebody to pour into you to show you the ropes, it can be difficult because it's hard to find people, who are willing to pour into you, to do that.
Well, see, I think my issue is with that, though, is that, I think it's good to have mentors. And like Patience was saying that, when you're young, you naturally have that leader aspect. But I think that when you talk about serving, is it just ministry? Or is it like serving your community young? Serving, you know what I'm saying? Like, and what, like, are we talking about, if we're talking about straight ministry, I think it is possible, but it depends on your example.
Absolutely.
I think the character traits go in any arena or avenue.
Right.
To serve the community or serve your local ministry, there are just certain traits that you have when you're a leader. And if you look at the definition of a leader, a simple definition is the person or group who leads or commands a group, organization, or country. So someone who can command or lead people into a position of going somewhere, whether it be towards a vision, towards a cause, towards a mission. There are certain character traits that you must possess to be able to get that out of people. And the whole conversation of the old saying of he who leads without anyone following is simply taking a walk.
Wow.
So if you don't possess the traits for someone to trust you enough to follow, are you really leading or are you just there? So
That's good.
The question is, are you really considered a leader based off a title or based off a platform, or are you actually a leader based off of what is behind you, whether it be a team, whether it be a responsibility? Are you actually being a leader?
Yeah, well, it has to go back to your impact.
Yeah.
And being young, I know in ministry, we always talk about how, time, that whole time thing. And once you hit 30, it's like we feel old. Like I just hit 30 in September and it was like, I'm getting old. But not realizing, I know in ministry, we always use Jesus as an example,
Yeah.
that his ministry had just started,
Yeah.
At the age of 30. And so when you talk about leading and being young, your impact can take place way before, you really think you're old.
Yeah.
So when you talk about a millennial and that huge gap, like for millennials, we have a lot of impact. And we've had a lot of impact in the past and currently. And so I know a lot of notable leaders who are young and who are creating an impact, who are creating generational wealth for themselves, who are creating a name for themselves. To me, to be a leader, you do have to have people to follow you. But I think that impact of how you are affecting other people around you, is more important.
I think it comes down just simply this. You cannot name yourself a leader. People around you should be able to say, I'm following this person. This is a leader. I think what happens a lot of times is the people get frustrated because they deem themselves leaders or deem themselves in positions when, truth be told, you're just not built like that.
Well,
I don't know if it's built like that or it's just, it's just the situation that you're in. You're just not ready.
I mean, even if you are leading, there should be a noticeable timeline of your servitude.
Okay, yeah.
And I feel like there are a lot of people who lead and we don't have a timeline of their servitude. So it's like, you want us to serve with you and serve you, but you've never served anybody.
Where did you come from?
Yeah, it's just like,
Who your peoples?
Yeah, like,
I don't even know who you are.
yeah, like you're who? Never heard of you.
Clean the bathroom.
Yeah.
Do you know where the bathrooms
You know
are?
what I'm saying? Like that's so I think it's hard. So I think with serving young, the first thing that I think is good for people to know is that it's okay to serve and never lead. There was one thing that my bishop, shout out to Bishop Shante Younger, there's one thing that my bishop says often is you can be a part of a department, you don't have to be over it.
Yeah, that's good.
So you can be in the kitchen ministry, but you don't have to be the chief chef.
Yeah.
And I think that's sometimes the issue sometimes growing up in church is if we're a part of it, if we've been there long, we got to be over it.
Yeah, seniority.
Yeah, like you can be a part of the win and not have to be the one to take the game-winning shot.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a thing with serving in ministry and being young. Be content with serving without even having to lead, or even be content with serving without being noticed, because I am more than sure we can go through the list of stuff that we've done and never heard thank you.
Absolutely.
Even to this day, like, won't stay there long. Even to this day, glory to God. That, you know, we've done stuff.
Yeah.
From churches, other preachers,
Recordings.
ministries. I mean, like, galore stuff. We'll never, ever hear thank you. And people will never know if it wasn't for our push, that it would never happen. And so I just think with serving, one of the things that you have to be okay with is being unrecognized.
Yeah.
Even at a young age, I think sometimes it's hard for young people because we're looking for that level of approval.
I'll put it like this. Leading, like you said, you have to be okay with not having no approval, not being recognized. If I ask this question right now, who's the president of the Golden State Warriors?
You gonna ask me an NBA question?
First of all, the Golden State Warriors are still a team. I don't know.
Oh, they just won a championship. Oh my gosh.
I at least knew that.
Okay, so Lord, this is a runaway train.
All I know is the Patriots aren't going to the Super Bowl. That's all I know.
His heart is broken. But based off
That's
of
great
just
news. Okay, carry on. My bad.
You get these two started. I'm a Redskins fan. That's real faith.
Yeah, we're moving.
But based off of who the team is, everyone knows Steph Curry, Klay Thompson.
Right.
You know, those names, those notable names, even though they're taking the shots, there would be no championship if the president didn't set up the tickets to be sold.
Right.
To set up the personnel to be available to open the doors to the arena. You know, those are the questions. And it's like you don't notice who they are until the win happens.
Right.
And they're on the platform and they're handed the trophy. And even then it's like, all right, and we're moving to the player. Player gives the acceptance speech. But they are valuable and vital. But being a leader is knowing that I may never get the shine for this, but I still got to do what I got to do.
That goes to being a good leader, though. Great leaders understand, because the difference in being a leader and being a good leader to being a great leader is great leaders are okay with pushing others ahead of themselves, you know, so that they necessarily don't get all the shine. They necessarily don't get that validation, because a lot of it comes from wanting validation and needing and thriving off of validation. Once you let go of needing that validation so much, then you can really tap into being a great leader and really serving.
Right.
Because in order to lead, you end up having to pick up everybody's job.
Yeah.
You end up having to do everything at some point.
Or at least understand them.
Right.
Yeah.
To help somebody else and delegate in that area. Yeah. But great leaders recognize the importance of seeing something in somebody else that they don't possess in order to get to the goal.
Well, I mean, that's just being a key leader, is knowing your weakness and employing your weakness instead of trying to figure it out and do it yourself. Like for me personally, I can come up with ideas, I can come up with concepts, but I am horrible when it comes to administration. It's just, I think faster than I can write and think faster than I can probably program and put it down on paper. But for me, I need to surround myself, and I make sure I surround myself with people who are great at administration, who are able to say, you know what, this is my area. This is what I'm good at. And, there were years, if we're talking about being a young leader, where I didn't have that mindset. I was just trying to do it. And it was like, even though I knew it was my weakness, it was like, no, I'm going to, because let me backtrack. The reason why I was in that mindset was because of being a young leader. You already come in the game with a little bit of a chip on your shoulder, because just based off your age and you being entered into the race, everyone's against you. A majority are, just based off of your age. And there's no getting around that. And if anyone says that's not real, it's just a bald-faced lie. People are always threatened, regardless of where you're coming from, whatever industry you're in. If you're coming into something and you're at an age that you don't seem qualified for, or you don't match up to what the requirements are for what is considered a leader, there's going to be someone on your trails who is just literally just mad. And I hate to say haters, because we talk about that all the time.
I mean, I think for me personally, serving while young was difficult because, and I don't really like using this word, but it is what it is, because I'm a PK. And so my father was the pastor.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just like, oh, well, he's got it easy because his dad is the bishop. First of all, my father's been a bishop as long as I've known him. And I've known my dad for 31 years. And so my father's been a bishop as long as I know him. He became an apostle in about 2000. And so it's always been hard for me because people think it's easy for PKs, when the truth is it's not. Because the moment that we start our journey, we are automatically put in their footsteps.
Yeah.
And so it's just like, this is difficult because they're like, oh, well, you got what you got because your dad is your dad. And I'm like, no, I got what I got because I am who I am.
If only you knew.
Right. And so because my father is a pastor, doesn't mean I have to pastor. I do pastor, but that's not solely because my father was a pastor. And I said all that to say that sometimes it gets hard for us because one of the things that we can cover it early that we were talking about even prior to the show was being called or being convinced.
Yeah.
And so how many people are like, you can serve, but are you really called to do what you're supposed to do?
Yeah.
Or are you convinced because somebody before you is doing it and they make it look good?
But that gets back into the question of, were you placed or were you purposed?
Wow, that's good.
Were you placed there because there was a need, or are you there because you've been called to it? And even if you've been called to it and you don't understand it, you may not even enjoy it in the moment, but you're content because you're called.
Right.
Yeah.
And a lot of frustration comes, and I think where we get burnout from young leaders, we get frustration from young leaders, we get Instagram and Facebook rants from young leaders, is because they're not where they're really called to be. And it's like the first sign of trouble, I'm going to blow this whole thing up, because truth be told, I really don't want to be here. And here's one thing I'll tell anyone in leadership in any area, whether it's government, whether it's ministry, whether it's in just local community, if you're not called to it, get out of it.
If you're doing it for financial gain, find something else to do.
Save yourself and save everyone else who's actually called to it. Because what will end up happening is you will start imploding.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what will end up happening is your character will be literally trash. And I think what happens now is we're hearing a lot of the whole millennials aren't crap, or, millennials don't, or they're lazy, don't want to do anything. And it's like, that's a huge generalization. And I was talking to some people about it before. Yes, millennials are go-getters. Yes, millennials want to work. Millennials have ideas. But there is a remnant and a section of our generation who are just lazy, and there's no way around it. It's just in every generation.
Isn't that in every generation?
That's every generation.
I was about to say.
But, the generalization of all young leaders aren't like that. And just be honest and say, you know what, there are some, but I'm not going to be one.
Well, when you talk about, young leaders making sure you're called, to that position, Pastor Candy West, shout out to Pastor Candy.
What up, Candy?
She had posted something on her stories talking about grace and making sure that the season that you are in and the positions that you are in, you're graced for. Because if your grace has run out in that position, when the crushing comes, you will either bleed or you produce oil. And so knowing that difference, but always staying before God in order to understand everything happens in seasons.
Yeah.
And when you are out of season in a position, that burnout comes because you're bleeding.
Right.
Yeah.
And you're bleeding on yourself, you're bleeding on others. That's when your character starts to fall apart. And it makes so much sense because when you're talking about callings and you're talking about purpose and leadership, if you are called to leadership in any capacity, like everybody in this room, I know for me personally, I was just talking about it. Like, I was reluctant to answer the call, and so always ran. But when the time came to serve and actually do it, I was still content. Even though, that resistance sometimes comes. But just understanding, I think when you understand your calling, there's a sense of don't stop, don't quit, keep going, regardless of what happens, to where your character is not tainted, to where your character doesn't change when trying times come. But if you're not called, that's when, everything goes awry.
Yeah.
And you're trying to continuously try to fix it to upkeep, the facade of what you're trying to keep up. But it's just...
As we move into this segment of some things that we learned while being young leaders, and the one thing I would say is after I've been a leader since, 19, and an actual leader.
I thought you was about to say 1900s.
Don't do it. But one thing I learned, and I would just tell everyone a word of advice: pace yourself. You don't have to overproduce because you feel outmatched or you feel like you have to prove something. And when I say pace yourself, there is a golden word that will save you so much heartache, pain, tears, moments of wanting to quit. It's this word called no. And I feel like one of the biggest deficits that young leaders get into is because we're young, we say yes to everything that is asked of us. And truth be told, there's a lot of stuff on young leaders' plates that don't belong there. Like if you're over the marketing ministry or you're over the marketing development area of your job, just because you're talented enough to be able to send emails or you're talented enough to answer phones doesn't mean you should be taking on a whole nother job title. And here's the other thing, not get compensated for it. And what'll end up happening is based off of our age and people thinking, oh, you got so much energy, just do it. And us not wanting to let them down or letting them see us sweat. What'll end up happening is we start loading our plate up. And I heard this before. My grandfather always says it. Nothing worse than, getting to heaven and God saying, you did 17 things, but I only called you to 3. What are you here for? And killing yourself early, whether or not physically, but at least mentally and spiritually being dead off of things that you really were never called to. And I loaded my plate up. Man, I was doing any and everything. I was doing graphics, website design, leading worship, running the sound, getting graphics on the screen, trying to do everything.
The difference between then and now, though, is, and we've had this conversation before, that we learned how to do the sound, how to do graphics, how to play, do all these wonderful things. And we learned to do them in order to fulfill a need. It's not because we wanted to do them.
Come on now.
They just had to be done.
Yeah.
And so that's something to even consider serving in ministry. What you're doing, are you doing it because you want to do it? Or are you just trying to fulfill a need? Like I found joy in doing sound because I had to.
Yeah.
I only know what each cable is because I had to know.
Yeah.
Not because I wanted to know. I was content behind the keyboard, but the sound man didn't show up to church one Sunday. So I got back there and was like, I guess I'm going to figure this out. Because, it was a need at that time. And so, I just think that knowing it's good to fulfill a need, but don't get stuck in doing something to help out.
Yeah.
That you're not in your call place. And one thing I had learned talking to some friends last year is that we'll get so comfortable with letting people deal with us by what we're good at that we will reject what we're called to do.
Wow.
Yep.
So you'll be operating from a good place and not the gifted place.
Yeah. Wow.
That's good.
And so I'm like, my biggest thing is like, okay, because people were content with me playing everywhere.
Yeah.
But I'm like, I'm not called to do that. I'm good at that, but that's not my gifting.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we get caught in the good thing and forget the gifting.
Yeah.
And so I guess a good plot twist question, is how do we get out of the I'm good at this, but I'm gifted to do that?
I'll put it like this. One of the things that'll get you out of that position is knowing that you being in that place may be stopping someone from getting to where they should be.
Wow.
And one thing I had to learn was I thought I was being a bridge, but I was being a blockage.
Yep.
And what ends up happening is you become a cancer instead of a conduit.
Yeah.
Man.
And
That's
what
real.
should be happening is just because we were needed in that place, even if the person who asked you to get there doesn't tell you you're not needed anymore, you need to have the gall to say, I'm stopping someone from getting to what they've been called to because it's just conditional.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's not permanent. This is just temporary. Yes, I know I watched the kids in children's church for 3 weeks because someone was sick, but that doesn't mean I'm staying back here. I got to go feed the people. It's just, and you can't wait for others to tell you you're relieved of your duty.
But okay, because this is my question. So what happens when you're placed somewhere out of a need, but then you find yourself actually wanting to stay there,
Mm-hmm.
but you're still not called and nobody tells you that you need to move?
You said, so a person wants to stay there?
Yeah.
I guess in the sense that they grow an appreciation for fulfilling the need,
Yeah.
but where they're needed is not necessarily where they're called to be. And that's a very good question because it happens a lot.
Yeah.
I think for that particular individual, they've kind of got to search themselves because a lot of the days that I spent smiling didn't necessarily mean I was happy.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that day I felt good,
Yeah.
but it doesn't mean I was happy.
Yeah.
And so I think that people have to consider just because you're smiling doesn't mean you're happy.
Yeah.
And so they can be content in serving, like, we're dealing with children's ministry. You can work in the children's ministry and be like, okay, this is nice. But the truth is you're called to be on the kitchen ministry. But because you love kids and you're like, okay, I love doing this, eventually, even though you like it, you will not be satisfied.
Yeah.
And so I think sometimes, because it happened to me, that I became dissatisfied. That after a while, I'm just like, oh, okay, so like, this is cool, or this was nice, until I'm just like, I'm no longer happy. And so even my counter question for that would be, how long did you run from the assignment?
Go ahead, mother.
You was calling, but like how long? Like you said it earlier, like, I'm just like, I'm gonna run. So how long did you actually run?
Because you have a different perspective than we do.
Oh, absolutely.
So
I have a way different perspective, and I'm trying to base my questions in a way that don't ruffle too many feathers, because I can.
This is Motivate Unplugged. Ruffle.
Listen,
They have ridges.
hey,
I ran for a long time. I think because everybody associates me with singing. Of course, everybody knows.
You sound like Fergie Jesus.
Oh
the
my
voice
gosh,
is pure,
do not
Like
start.
a mermaid.
voice box is a virgin.
So automatically, everybody, wants to talk about music,
Right.
going forward.
Yep.
That's a gift.
Mm-hmm.
That's a talent. Your gifts will make room for you.
Mm-hmm.
I had to get my own understanding that just because I was gifted in this area, this was not necessarily my purpose or calling in order to impact the lives of others.
Right.
Gotcha.
Yes, your giftings can create impact, but the impact can be on a deeper level when you are in your calling. And so for me, it had to be around 24, about my 25th birthday, when I finally was like, all right, let me stop running and actually listen to God.
How many years total was that? Or was it a couple of months?
How many years?
Was it years or was it months?
Before I answered the call?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it was years.
Oh, okay.
Because, I mean, I had been running for years. I mean, I grew up in the church.
Okay.
You know, my parents weren't PKs or anything, but I grew up in the church. And even after my parents divorced, my mom kept us in the church, singing and everything. So I grew up in the church, and, you know, it had been prophesied over my life from a young age, you know, my calling, you know, to teach and preach. But when, you know, you surviving, you know, dealing with homelessness and all kinds of stuff, that stuff goes out the window.
Right.
Until God gets you to a certain point, you know, in your life where you can answer it for yourself, not through your parents.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
You know, and so that's what really happened with me, you know, around that 24, 25 age where it was like, okay, God. And I was at the place where it was like, I need something different anyways. I can't, yes, you know, my gifts have made room for me. Yes, they've gotten me so far, but it's only so far I'm going to get with this. I know there's more for me.
Yeah.
Like that unfulfilling. You know, I wasn't satisfied, you know, and finding that satisfaction in your calling and in your purpose is just, it's a whole different, it opens different doors for you. It opens, you know, your spirit, your eyes to see, you know, just a glimpse of what God has for your future. So
I think she just retired music.
Yeah, right.
oh my gosh.
Well, all right.
I didn't retire music. Look, it'll always be there.
I would say for me, I had a different situation because I went straight into my calling from school and went straight to full-time staff and full-time ministry.
Okay.
But I burned out, and then I hit Dipset, which led into years of convincing myself I'm good based off of my experience as a young leader and burning out and dealing with the stress, the strain, the expectations, and all that stuff. And, you know, I had a different experience though, because I think I would have done better in leading in another place. And that's ruffling feathers. But, you know, you know, it was tough for me because I was coming back from college leading people who changed my diapers. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't you're leading because who you're connected to. It was, no, I'm leading because I'm qualified to.
Right.
But it was still tough because that respect level, and that's what I think is a big issue for young leaders.
Always like this is little Marcus.
Yeah.
I remember when,
Yeah, and it's like, no, like, dude, show up on time. Oh, no, I'm good. It's just Marcus. And it's like, yo, like, right. So, you know, I think that's another issue I know I've heard from other young leaders as well. The respect thing is major. It is if you don't receive it or you don't feel as though you're respected, if you're not strong enough, that thing will take you out because you'll feel like everything you say is questioned.
Well, this is my thing, and this is a message to any older generation, and even for us, being at the age that we're at with the generations coming up
Z and
behind
Alpha
us.
is coming. We're old.
Time does not negate wisdom. So,
yeah, I know a lot of childish old people.
Right, and
in their right mind,
and it's baffling to me sometimes because they feel like, okay, you don't got no skin in the game. And I've had adults tell me, you know, well, you need somebody who, and it's like, well, you know, asking a question, who do you talk to? Or who do you have, you know, that you confide in? And when the people were named, I'm not talking about anybody like that. I'm talking about somebody who got some years, some skin in the game. That means nothing to me.
Okay, let's just put this in perspective. And this is for all generations listening. And this is for young leaders because we're dealing with millennials. This is a young adult AIM podcast. Anybody can listen, but this is AIM for our generation. Wake up call. Our generation was coding when we were in middle school. It's called MySpace. We were doing things way before our time. And it was like, you know, I think the question is, who do y'all think you are? And it's like, we were learning things not because we wanted to. We were learn things because we were just exposed to it naturally. It's like no one thought when they were making their top 8 or doing their profile page that they were freaking coding.
Yeah.
It was just like, yo, I'm trying to get my page looking good.
And my page was lit.
Oh my God. I had the music automatically playing. I had a top 20 unlocked. But, things like that, the access to Google, the access to be able to watch a YouTube clip. And no, that does not mean that we know it all. But us knowing doesn't mean that you know less. Just because we learned it quicker doesn't make your knowledge null and void. The answer is the answer. If I found out that 2 times 10 is 20 on the internet because I Googled it or through a calculator app, it doesn't make it any different than the person who learned on the abacus moving the beads.
Okay.
The answer is the answer. It's just...
Okay. Are you crazy?
Oh my gosh.
Wait, what is it called?
The abacus.
I didn't even know that's what it was called,
Neither
first
did
of all. So.
Man, he's a dinosaur. I'm older than him. It's crazy. I think that was good. I think it's weird though because okay, prime example, and I'm not worried. My father's never going to see this. My problem is like my dad,
to him.
my mom, my mother. Hey, Mom. My mom purchased me an air fryer for Christmas.
Hey.
Still in the box. It's still wrapped
What?
up.
I've used mine about 40 times.
Yeah, it's still in the box. I'm waiting because I know the moment I use it, my dad's gonna take over it.
Yep.
So I'm like,
My granddad has already taken over mine.
right. So which one? I'm gonna use mine downstairs in the basement. And I'm gonna come upstairs and wash it every time I get a chance. But so here's the thing. So the other day he was like, "Hey man, you ever had air fried chicken?" No, because I don't eat chicken. Yeah, man, we should do some air fried chicken. I said, Dad, what's like we use the air fryer? I'm going somewhere. He's like, yeah. Then he says, well, never mind. It's not going to be done because it's not cooked in the oven and it's not fried. And immediately I started thinking, I'm like,
Wait.
in his mind, because there's a quicker way to get it done, it's not sufficient.
Yeah.
And I feel like that concept plagues them in every area of the generation prior to us. If it's quick, it's not sufficient.
Yeah.
And that's not true. I mean, come on, we had easy bake ovens. Like, we've always had quick and sufficient. I don't understand.
Always.
But here's the thing. There is time. And what's considered quick and efficient to the other generations is in time for us. It's not fast to us. We're learning at the pace of what technology is giving and what information is getting pushed out. So it's like, I don't see anything wrong with me going online. I get mad when I find out that the daggone Google thing ain't gonna give me the answer. When I get that spinning wheel of death, I'm like, is the internet broken? And so, I
pick up a book.
but exactly. So, having that moment, I'm frustrated because that's what the speed is that we've been brought up in. So I understand the frustration, but once again, the answer is the answer. And like you said, the chicken is done whether it's in the oven or it's in the air fryer. My biggest hang up is, are we mad about how it got done, or are we ever just going to be satisfied that it's done?
I think it's because the level of enjoyment out of the preparation prior. He enjoys fried chicken. So fried chicken and air fried chicken to him, it's not the same.
Mm-hmm.
Brother, chicken is chicken. Like
as long as it's not clucking.
Air fryer.
Right. And so I think
it's healthier.
I think the problem is
crispier.
Right, because of the preparation. We're really gonna talk about chicken? Like, I just don't understand. I think the problem is because of the preparation.
Mm-hmm.
He saw how it was prepared. In the air fryer, you put it in and you've gotta wait.
Yeah.
You can't just keep opening, like not like the oven.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just keep opening it. And so I think that because he's not able to see it, it's like, is this sufficient? Or I didn't see it get done. And I think that is what we come against, even serving while young, is what we talked about prior, is that we have found the quicker way.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean it's not sufficient.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that it's not good. It just means there is a more excellent way.
So this is what I had to learn as a young leader, and this is what I would encourage all young leaders to make you a great young leader, is just because your way is faster doesn't mean you don't learn the other way.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think that's where young leaders get it messed up of, okay, boomer, bro, I don't want to hear nothing about your method of doing it. And it's
Right.
like, for me, I've always wanted to learn always.
Right.
Because it's like, if this ever fails, like you said, if Google goes down, do you even know where to go get the book? Or do you have the means to call someone to get the answer?
But even in that, a while ago, I remember having a conversation with the patients, and she had said something that really like blew my mind, is that eventually somebody's going to find a quicker way than ours.
Absolutely. It's already happened.
Right. And so, it's starting to blow my mind.
It's
Like,
already done.
Like even when Gabe was talking about that 8-year-old kid that's getting millions.
Oh, Ryan, yeah.
Ryan?
To play with toys?
Yeah.
Bruh.
Why didn't I think of that?
But once again, this is getting back to the speed of information.
And
not only the speed of information.
Wrestling figures.
Oh my gosh. But it took, let's say, 30 years, 20 years, 10 years, technology started developing. We've been, millennials, and we're about to phase out by 37, 38. We've been lapped already.
Yeah. But the thing is with the whole time thing, like even with Ryan making millions of dollars, when all of the YouTubers and vloggers who are now making those millions, when they first started out, YouTube wasn't even monetized.
No, it wasn't.
So when you think about it, and that's why it's so important for our generation, because we are the only generation who's known both worlds.
Yeah.
Wow.
We're the last.
We're the last ones.
To know analog and digital.
We grew up with the change.
Yeah.
We
That's
grew up with
good.
the advancement.
I never thought about
So
that.
because we grew up with the advancement, we know about a cassette and a VHS, but also a DVD. We saw it go from every single
saw it,
phase.
Yeah.
Now you can't even. Why would I buy a CD?
A kid doesn't even.
Cars aren't even made with CD players anymore.
No, they're
Really
not.
not.
And so therefore, that is the issue that we have because with the older generation, because it's like we understand what you had too because we grew up with it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But we also grew up with this, so we're going to embrace the quicker way.
Yeah.
Either way, it's still getting done, and what we know is going to be outdated. There's stuff that we do
Eventually,
now that
yeah.
the younger generation is like, y'all still do that? And it's like, dang, like,
Yeah, somebody said something about Facebook, and I was like, what's wrong with Facebook? Nah, bro, that Jones tired. I'm like, bro, I just figured it out. I was on Instagram, like, now I'm on TikTok, and everyone's like, yo, TikTok's dope. And I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, as soon as I figure this Jones out, it's going to be something new.
no, for real. I can't even wrap my mind
I didn't know
around
what
it.
Vine was
Until it was dead.
Vine
until
is
the
gone.
day it was going out. They're like, no more Vine. What is Vine?
Do it for the vibe.
Yeah, like the day that Instagram started the video, they was like, they're going to put Vine out. Vine, what is this Vine? What are we talking about here?
For real.
Yeah, I honestly, God didn't know, but it's true that they're already finding a way.
Yeah.
And so even though we are still relevant and we are still here, we are finding a way to be content with the other generation that's coming after us, them coming in. And I think the problem is it's been hard for us serving in ministry because half of the time that we've been in place, we've been trying to get the baton. And so I really don't, hopefully I'll get invited back next show. But that's been half of our problem.
You have a permanent seat.
That's our problem, that we've been spending most of the time trying to convince those who trained us that we're ready.
So, okay.
Ooh,
okay.
Jesus, hold up. I just caught myself because I was about to be really petty. Wait.
Okay, let me take this before she gets petty.
I was...
Here's the, I think, where our frustration lies with being young leaders, and I can only say this for myself. And I had to get an okay in my own spirit of what's in you will always be accurate and available and ready for when God calls it. But my biggest frustration I drew was, bro, I'm losing the sauce. Like, I'm losing my relevance. Like, I'm in a position now to where I'm catching my stride. And it's like, as soon as I started getting into a good rhythm and getting ready, it was like, dang, I got lapped. Like, dang, I'm outdated now. Like, I gotta find another way. I gotta find another key. Like, I gotta find a new method. And I had to be okay with, all right, cool. There will be another chance. There's another time. But you can't negate the fact that it's frustrating.
I think the problem is maybe your sauce is relevant. You're just serving it to the wrong people.
Yikes.
And that's what I had to consider, because the greatest day of my life, which is very hard for a lot of people, and as much as I love him, my life turned around the day I left my father's church. And I still go back whenever he needs me, but there were certain lessons my father couldn't teach me. Because I would always be Corey behind the keyboard. So even now, where you going to go preach? Where you headed? Oakland. Oh, who you know in Oakland? I don't know. I don't know them. They know me. Like, yeah. You know. So I think it's that concept of, it's just like, you know. So now sometimes I'm like, I gotta go play. Oh, you still play? Yeah. I'm like, I know how to do both. And so I think that's been the hardest part. And it's not even in the potential of just. And I can say this confidently, not just my father. It's been other people that I've gleaned from.
Yeah.
That I've spent majority of the time as a leader trying to convince you, even though you trained me, you saw me through the trenches, you saw me through my transitions, but yet still, because I didn't go your way.
Yeah.
I didn't go the pathway that you thought I should go. It's like, he's not ready yet. And so it's just like, oh, okay. Like for me, I went against the grain. I didn't take my father's church. I started to work from the bottom, which is completely different.
It's a whole
other beast.
Yeah.
And so that's been like my thing. So it's like, I'm not being disrespectful. He doesn't know my struggle. Because even though he did start, now I would say that he did start to work from the bottom, but the Lord told him to transition to something else.
Gotcha.
So what he's in now, he took over.
Gotcha.
So it's hard because he spent I've been here for 23 years. He has spent the last 23 years developing a culture.
Gotcha.
That now that I'm in a place that he was 23 years ago, he can't recall the things that he had to do. So it's just like, man, like, you know, trying to prove that you're good enough. I think that's been half of our problem. Like,
that's a big part of it.
Like, okay, we're good enough. We're good enough.
Well, I think, but that goes back to validation for me.
Right.
And one thing, it's been a year. It was a year, January 13th of me being over the women's ministry. And during like maybe around June, July of last year, I was like, okay, I think, you know, it's time for me to start building a team, you know, of women. And that whole proving yourself, I didn't feel like I had to prove myself to leadership. I felt like I needed to prove myself to who was under my leadership versus trying to get validation from those above me and who came before me. Because to me, if we put too much emphasis on those who come before us, we neglect who we're actually servicing.
Yeah, wow.
And so for me, you know, I felt like I wasn't being a good leader to the women's ministry because I felt like I was too tapped out and I had my hands in too many different areas and too many different places. But even with that, I was okay with not trying to prove myself to leadership, you know.
Wow.
And for me, my situation was a little bit different, you know, than pastoral as you all are talking.
Okay.
Because for me, I just went in and stepped up and said, I'm ready to take over the women's ministry. And it was like, okay, great. Like, it wasn't like I had to wait for a baton to be handed down and say, okay, you know, this is ours or this is mine. And I have a pool of people to choose from or you're not ready or this. So I guess it's a little different for me, but I had to get rid of that whole validation thing.
Yeah.
You know, and seeking that validation because I would rather get validation from the people I'm servicing versus the next level that I'm trying to get to. Because honestly, the next level I'm trying to get to I can get there without who is there right now.
Right.
And like I said, for me, that's what literally the last 3 months of 2019 were for me. Recognizing you are still yourself, your purpose, your calling, your gifts are yours, point blank, period. You don't need validation from anybody else to do what God has called you to do. And be unapologetic about it.
But that transmits not only through ministry, that transmits to corporate, that transmits to anything, a local business owner, whoever you are. That concept relates to everyone.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think when I know we had this conversation, if somebody's probably like, I'm skipping this episode, I'm not in ministry. It's like, no, these characteristics and all these traits are across the board.
Yeah, I mean, even like lastly, as far as like a subtopic of it all, was just that was one of the things I really struggled with, was that validation piece.
Mm-hmm.
Because I esteemed these people so high that where they were was ideal. So I'm like, oh, okay, I think I want to do that. And I think I want to do that. And so it kind of became frustrating when I was doing all of the things I knew to do, but nobody was celebrating my progress.
Yeah.
And so that was a major struggle for me that I really had to kind of like get delivered in a sense. I know that really sounds deep, but it's just me getting free, like getting free from the bondage of saying, of me waiting for them to say, good job, Corey.
Yeah.
Good job. And so that started hindering me in a sense.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, okay, I didn't do a good job. I'm going to do it over.
Yeah.
I didn't do a good job. I'm going to do it over. And so I kept doing the same assignment over. So even to answer the question from earlier, I don't even know if I was running as much as I was in a cycle. I was in this cycle of like, okay, you won't tell me I did a good job. I guess I did a bad job.
Let me do it again.
So I kept doing it over and over. And God's like, you keep doing the same thing. And I'm like, yeah. And God's like, okay, yeah, so we're going to impress me. And that was the day that I kind of started realizing like, okay. And so one of the biggest things I've been trying to teach the people around me is to shift your thinking and go from perception to revelation.
Yeah.
And I think that we've been operating from a perception of what success in ministry is.
Yeah.
Because we think success in ministry is being known.
It's not.
It's not really being known. One of the greatest things that Bishop Jake said, he was on, who was with Pastor Stephen Furtick. He said, I don't want to be famous. I want to be effective.
Yeah.
But being effective makes me famous.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my
It's
God,
real.
like, wow. So he was like, I don't really care about being known. I care about being effective and about making an impact. It just so happens, he's like, in my relevancy and my ability to be pure, it's like people are like, I want that.
Yeah.
And so I think that for people, young people serving in ministry, desire to be pure, not only in your efforts, but in your intentions.
Yeah.
And in your lifestyle.
Oh my God. Like you have to be, because like you were saying earlier, that your character will go down the drain, but the problem is it'll go down the drain and you won't even know it. And the problem I have is when your character is trash, but nobody around you tells you that your character is trash.
Facts.
So you think that you're good, like, nah, bro, nah, it's just like, this is bad.
It's not a good look.
And so young in ministry, one of my offerings to you is find you people who are going to tell you the truth.
That your stuff stinks.
Like, like you have to, like, you got to have people around you that's like, okay, cool, that was good, but you can do it better.
Yeah.
And so like, being young in ministry, you can do it. It's possible, but get rid of that need for approval and find yourself with pure intentions and find people that are going to tell you the truth that, hey, you need to serve a little longer before you leave.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Because, I mean, and I know that it's probably like tough, but it started getting hard for me because even though I pastor, one of the offices that I function as far as ministry is the office of the prophet. But it started getting difficult because I started seeing like 11-year-old prophets and 12-year-old prophets. I'm like, what have you endured? What revelation have you come to at 11 years old? Like,
You have a bedtime.
you have Velcro shoes on. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Are those Heelys?
Yeah, like, oh my God. Your shoes light up?
That's your video?
Yeah, like,
Oh my God.
like, can you spell confessions? I don't understand. Like, But I started seeing
They make garments your size?
Thank you. I started seeing like 11-year-old apostles. I'm like, oh,
18-year-old senior pastors.
Yeah, I'm like, this is weird.
It's like you're a senior in high school.
Exactly.
Chill.
And so I feel like sometimes, I feel like sometimes it's probably going to be a little hurtful to some people, but that desire to be church famous, oh my God.
Kill it.
Yeah, like it's really hurting you because at 15, what are you, a freshman?
Yeah.
Yeah, be a freshman.
Yeah.
It's really, and I think that was part of my problem is I was forced to grow up too fast. Because I'm like, I didn't have time to do homework. Because when church was over on Tuesday, I had to be at Bible study, and I had to run the graphics for my father, and I had to turn his mic up, and then I had to play for praise and worship because my mother did praise and worship. And if I didn't have to play for my mother or do the graphics, then I had to be in youth Bible study. But then I had to go and dub or record the CDs rather, and then do duplication, and then do CD labels.
Oh, yeah,
then I
press
do
it.
the edits for the radio. And by the time all that's said and done, did you do your homework? Oh God, I got homework. Like it forced me to grow up.
Yeah.
And so be the age that you are.
And what'll end up happening is you'll become church smart but life dumb.
Wow. Well,
it's real.
It's the truth though.
Because I could mix a service, but I couldn't mix no chemicals if my life depended on it.
I failed science twice.
Oh my gosh.
No, for real.
I almost
was
didn't graduate.
trash
Yeah.
in school.
I almost didn't graduate.
For real. I completed 3 grades in one
I
summer.
always made the honor roll.
Trash. You said you always made the honor roll? God bless you. You overachiever. Do you want to go?
Listen,
do you
that
go
was
star?
all I had.
You
That was all I
You want to go
had.
star?
Okay. Yeah, I got my gold star. I graduated with a bachelor's, bruh. Look, let me stop.
You bring an apple to class?
Okay.
Here she goes.
Resume.
Oh. So as we get ready to close this out, what would you say to the young leader who's a little in over their head, who is in a place of, oh crap, I shouldn't be here, or I've been placed in the deep end and I don't know how to swim? What do you say to that young leader who's in a position of saying, you know what, this is just too much?
November 2018, I started my church in Maryland. By August of the following year, we had moved 2 states. The point is, it's okay to start over somewhere else. Know when it's not working. And I was embarrassed, and Marcus basically said, I'm just like, we got to move to Fredericksburg. They're like, okay, go. We're moving to North Carolina. Okay, go. And I'm like, what are the people going to say? It doesn't matter. I'm like, what are the people? And so now it's thriving as it should have. And I constantly ask myself, had I just obeyed God? Like, it's okay. One of the hardest days for me was admitting I missed God. Oh, man. Like, it humbled me. God's like, yeah, you're not going to always get it right. I'm like, but I'm a pro. You're not going to always get it. It doesn't matter. And so I say to that person, it's okay to say, this isn't working. You're in over your head. And like Marcus said earlier, if you learn the word no, there is value in preserving yourself.
Yeah.
If you don't let everybody have access to you, you will find value in preserving yourself. Like, so I tell them it's okay to start over, and it's okay to tell people no. Especially people that you know or people that you've done favors for. It is okay to tell.
People will put you out there because they want to see you do something that they don't have the gall to do for themselves. I mean, I've been asked multiple times, start a church. When you gonna start a church? It's like, bro, you ain't finna get me in trouble with God.
People told me to start and they still haven't visited. Thanks. Good
okay.
Patience, go.
They told me to start. We'll support you. Where you at?
Yeah, the Cash App hasn't changed since we started the church. I don't understand.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
I agree with Corey. That was part of the second part of your answer, saying no. I was gonna talk about one thing that I had to do was literally, if you don't take an assessment of yourself or an assessment of what you do on a weekly basis, on a daily basis, that is how you get to that place.
I'm missing it.
And so, or or just having too much on your plate.
Yeah.
And so for me personally, I did an assessment of everything that I had on my plate. And a lot of issues that we have as gifted people, and you're gifted in so many different areas, it's hard to really hone in and focus in on one or two things and be intentional about just those things in a particular season. And that's what I had to do. I had to go through and actually say, okay, I do hair. I'm not going to do hair in this season. Since I said that 2 weeks ago, I've had 5 different people in 2 weeks text me or come to me personally to do their hair. And I was almost like, dang, did I make the wrong call? Did I make the wrong call in this season? No, you made a decision for your peace in order to starve your distractions and feed your focus. And here comes the exact thing that you said you weren't going to do to test you.
Can I be devil's advocate before we close? My question, my counter question based upon what you just said is, how do you hold to that, especially when people start coming in like you need the money? And so like you find yourself in a hustle, and if that's like a side hustle, you're like, I need the bread. But like, how do you hold to that convention? Like, I'm not going to do this, even when it's a struggle.
I need the money. But what I am feeding my focus to is going to have a greater return than me spending hours on somebody's hair.
Yeah.
Got you.
Yeah.
Got
Me
you.
doing somebody's hair is going to take half a day or a whole day versus me saying no and me feeding my focus on my business.
Yeah.
And I can make the same amount. I can make double the money.
It's an investment. Yep.
Yeah.
So I will sacrifice this area in order to focus in another.
That's the word of sacrifice.
Get rid of the hat rack.
We have issues with sacrificing. And so once you recognize sacrifice comes with investment.
Yeah. That's good.
Yeah,
You
that's
can't
good.
you can't have one without the other. Point blank period. If you are investing somewhere, you are sacrificing in another area. If you're investing time, you're sacrificing time elsewhere. If you're investing money, you're sacrificing money elsewhere. You have to be intentional about your goals and where you want to go and focus in that direction. Point blank period. And so for that person who is overwhelmed, who is a young leader, who has too much on their plate, focus on what you need to focus on in this season and say no, cut back, and move forward.
And when I made the
and
statement,
not feel bad about it. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Don't feel bad about
No,
it because I
don't feel
almost felt bad about telling people no. But how you get around that is go into your network. I can't do it, but I can point you in the direction of somebody else who can.
Wow.
and when I said the statement of get rid of your hat rack, for me, I had to get rid of the options. Because if I see them, I'm going to do it.
Mm.
And it's like, I can do it. I can time this out to where I can get this done and still be able to do what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yep.
And when I removed the option, one of the greatest things, and Corey, we had this conversation. He was like, you did what? I made sure I made it into a point to where I had no equipment with me at home.
Man, I'm still in the way.
And for me, anyone who knows me knows I always have had a keyboard with me, a laptop with me. I've had a computer somewhere near to where I was able to get work done for someone or for myself. And going where I've been called to doesn't require me to have the tools that would get me occupied for doing something else.
Right.
So for me, to help me, I had to make sure I didn't have any distractions in arm's reach.
Wow.
Because it's just, I'm just going to fiddle around with this beat for about 15 minutes. 5 hours later, I'm burnt and tired and have no energy to do what I've actually been called to do. So I had to get rid of.
Put the kids to bed by myself.
Yeah, you know. So I had to get rid of my hat rack. And depending on as talented or wherever you are, like you said, multi-talented to do things, you may have a lot of hats to get rid of.
Yeah.
Because nowadays we are all in a position to where I don't have a graphic designer, I'm gonna learn how to do graphics. I don't have a web developer, I'm gonna go download Wix or Weebly. You know, so a lot of us are capable of doing multiple things, but it goes back to the old saying, jack of all trades, master of none.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's
And
exactly what I was about to say.
Yeah.
how many people are jacks of all trades, But when it comes down to it and you're up against a master of one, you're trash.
Gotta learn mastery.
Yeah.
But mastering requires isolation.
Yep, gotta stay focused. And just because you have multiple hats doesn't mean you have to wear them all at one time.
No, because you look like a fool.
You do.
And but if you look at anybody who is, I'll say famous, and successful, we know them for what they're famous for. But when you actually get a closer look at their lives, it's like, oh, I didn't even know they did that. Like I asked you the other day, I was looking at Big Boy from Outkast, his Instagram. He cooks. He's a chef now. He loves animals, but you know him for his music.
Yeah.
And so when you put it in that perspective, he mastered music first. And to me, it's just like you say, what is that saying? I said, a means to an end.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people say, okay, this is a means to an end. No, I say it's a means to a beginning. Because what I'm doing right now is not necessarily what I'm called to do. What I'm doing right now is maybe not necessarily, what I desire to do for a lifetime. But it's a means to a beginning of what I really, really want to do. This is something that's going to fund that. This is something that's I'm going to acquire the skills or the knowledge or the wisdom in order to go into those other areas.
It's a catapult.
Right, and catapult it. So it's just understanding that mastery. But as millennials, a lot of us have to understand when it comes to mastery, you have to shut everything down and focus your tunnel vision.
Yeah, it's
one
real.
area, 2 areas max. Because if you add 3, you can't maneuver in it and you cannot master any of them.
And if you are going to do that, you got to get some people around you who can hold on to what you're letting go. Like for a Bishop Jakes. Bishop Jakes has multiple streams.
Right.
But Bishop Jakes isn't in every meeting for a TV show. He's got people on his staff or his team around him. Now, that doesn't mean he's not inside of it, but if he was to do all the meetings for everything, every venture that he has, there would be no Bishop Jakes because that man would be in the grave from running with no sleep.
Yeah.
And, I'm reminded of, like you said, people who have talents and means to do multiple things, but have to focus on the long haul. What's the end game? You look at Condoleezza Rice. To be who Condoleezza Rice is, but most people don't know, she is an accomplished concert pianist who has the ability to play anyone under a floor and literally is killing at concert, just kills it. But she told her parents when she was growing up, when she visited the White House outside, I'm going to be in there. Now, just because she was talented at piano doesn't mean that she was like, I'm going to balance and I'm going to be able to do both. And now, look, she's not even in the White House anymore, but now she's just touring playing keys. So, and on the stages that she would have got on if she just would have stuck with piano. So that just because you're doing it and you're called to it for this season doesn't mean you'll never be able to utilize everything else that you poured into.
Right.
It may come back around. Never know.
Yeah. Like Patience was saying, and we're about to leave y'all alone. Like Patience was saying that she'll always do music.
Mm.
And that's what I was saying, I believe in the first episode, that it's kind of getting weird because music for us in this room is starting to become a hobby. Mm. It's just like, I like doing it.
It's cool.
Yeah, it's cool. So I'm just like, okay, I like doing this. Even though the demand of the people are changing, and we don't do it for the people, but it's just like, okay. But I think be content with knowing that if you've done that and you do it well, that skill will always be there.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like, for me, in the way of music, I've become the older generation. I'm content with what I know. They know some stuff. I'm just like, okay, how did you do that?
Mm-hmm.
But, just being content with knowing that skill is always there. But it's not there necessarily as a backup plan. And I think sometimes that I happen that, okay, if this failed, I'm never going to try this again. I'm going back to music. No. That's it's not a backup plan.
There is no plan B.
Yeah, like, what I'm saying? Like, it's either like plan A or plan A.
Yeah.
If it doesn't work, keep going at it.
Yeah.
And so, if you're serving in ministry, man, keep serving. It's hard. Trust me. It's hard.
Yes,
it's
it
tough. But it's really, really worth it. And You do not have to wait till heaven to get your reward.
No, you do not.
Do not. You can have a reward here on earth. So
as we close this out, and anybody got anything they want to say? Just to encourage the people as we get ready to leave, because I'm pretty sure we have reached our peak of an episode.
They're still here.
Yeah, they're still here. If not, pause it. We'll catch
Come
it.
back in the car on your way home.
Oh my God!
I would
listen on your lunch break.
Yeah. The one thing that I would say, if you're young, if you're leading, whether in ministry, whether in corporate America, lawyer's office, whatever you do, if you are leading, protect your peace and guard your heart. Because your mental health and your spirit, above all else, is what's important. And if anything threatens your peace and is threatening your heart, you have to take a stand.
Boom.
That was actually
good.
pretty powerful.
Come on, Pastor.
I'd say protect your purity. There's so many lanes to that, but protect your purity. Like, for real, like, from your sanity. Be okay with not knowing. There might be some things that you don't know, but it might be for your protection.
Wow.
And so protect your purity. Even going on with what Patience said, just protect your ability to stay pure. If it looks weird, it looks strange, don't investigate it. Run your lane. Protect your purity, because it'll hurt you in the long run.
Well, dang. I would just say for all the young leaders, everyone who witnesses your anointing may not be approved to see your ascension. And you just got to rock with whoever God places around you for the time that it is that you get lifted up higher. So, thanks for checking out another episode.
I felt about this quiet storm voice you just put on. Hey, man, but your voice was chopped and screwed.
Well, it's better than yo, what's going on?
Oh, okay. Patience, do it once before we leave. Please do it once. Please do.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Marcus.
Catch us next episode, y'all. We out.
Peace.